Imagine a queen so powerful that her very existence held kingdoms together, and yet, one night, she simply vanished. No body, no farewell, no explanation, only silence. Was she murdered in secret? Did she escape to live in disguise? Or was she erased by the very king who once swore to protect her? For centuries, her disappearance has haunted history like a ghost that refuses to fade. Stay with me till the end of this video, because the truth behind her vanishing is far stranger and far darker than you could ever imagine. And if you love uncovering hidden histories like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss the secrets time tried to bury. In the world of royalty, history often remembers kings for their battles, crowns and legacies, while queens are remembered for their beauty, influence, or scandals. But sometimes, a queen's story is so strange, so unsettling, that it disappears, almost entirely from the written record. Imagine for a moment a queen so important, so powerful, and yet her entire existence was almost wiped away from history overnight. How can a queen be crowned, worshipped by her people, stand at the side of a mighty king, and then suddenly vanish? This is not a fairy tale, but a chilling truth. The story of a mysterious queen whose life and disappearance remain one of history's most haunting puzzles. Our story begins in the dimly lit courts of Europe, where crowns carried unimaginable weight, and marriages were not about love, but about politics, power, and bloodlines. In this world, queens were not only companions but also symbols of dynasties, often the bridge between two nations. The queen we speak of today was young, intelligent, and said to be breathtakingly beautiful. Chronicles whispered that when she entered a hall, nobles fell silent, as if light itself had followed her in. But behind this aura of majesty was a secret that history tried to bury. She was married to a king whose reign was filled with turbulence. Enemies surrounded the kingdom, and whispers of betrayal echoed in the shadows. This queen became his strength and his weakness. She knew the secrets of the court, the alliances being formed, and the betrayals being plotted. She read every letter that came across the king's desk, and often influenced decisions behind closed doors. Yet, strangely, the official chronicles began to erase her name. Historians who had praised her suddenly grew silent, as if commanded never to speak of her again. And then, one night, she vanished. No grave, no records of exile, no sign of execution. She was there one day, and the next she was gone, leaving only fragments of rumors behind. Some said she had been poisoned by rivals who feared her influence. Others believed she had tried to escape with a forbidden lover, only to be caught and silenced. Another theory suggested she knew something so dangerous, so threatening to the stability of the crown, that the king himself ordered her removal. From history, whatever the truth may be, the disappearance of this queen was unlike anything seen before. But to understand her mysterious fate, we must go back to the beginning, her origins, her marriage, and the dangerous world she was drawn into. Born into a noble family, her childhood was marked not by freedom but by grooming. She was taught languages, music, court etiquette, and the art of silence. From a young age, she was told her beauty was not her own, it belonged to her family, a bargaining tool for alliances. Her marriage to the king was decided not in a church or at a festival of love, but in candlelit meetings between advisors and diplomats who sought to strengthen their kingdoms through her union. The wedding itself was a spectacle, celebrated with grand feasts, music, and cheers of the people. To the world, it looked like a perfect beginning, a beautiful young queen beside a powerful king, a symbol of hope for a kingdom weary of wars and uncertainty. But the palace walls held secrets. For behind the laughter of nobles and the glitter of jewels, power struggles were already at play. The new queen was not just a bride. She was a pawn in a dangerous game. As days turned into months, she adapted quickly. She listened, observed, and soon discovered that the court was filled with whispers and daggers. Friends could become enemies overnight, and allies could betray with a smile. The queen's intelligence set her apart. Unlike other royal consorts who focused only on ceremonies and appearances, she engaged with matters of the state. She sat in on council meetings, offering her perspective, which often surprised even the most seasoned advisors. Her ability to sway the king's decisions did not go unnoticed. Some admired her as a guiding light, while others began to fear her influence. Rumors spread that the queen had her own network of informants, servants, and messengers who kept her aware of every plot and scheme within the palace. Some nobles accused her of witchcraft, suggesting no one could know so much without some kind of dark magic. Others believed she was simply too clever for her own good. But one thing was certain, she was no ordinary queen. And then came the night. That changed everything. According to one account, a servant claimed to see the queen leave her chambers after midnight, dressed in a simple cloak, her face hidden. She was never seen again. Another account, however, insisted that she never left the palace at all, that she was taken, silenced, and her body hidden where no one would ever find it. The lack of official records only deepened the mystery. It was as though her existence had been deliberately erased. The people, confused by her sudden absence, whispered in marketplaces and taverns, Some mourned her as a victim of palace betrayal. Others believed she had fled to live in secret, and some feared she had been punished for sins unknown. But the strangest part was how quickly her memory was erased from official history. Documents that once mentioned her name were altered. Portraits where her face appeared were either removed or destroyed. Within months, she became a ghost of memory, existing only in rumors and fragmented stories passed down quietly. Why would an entire monarchy go to such lengths to erase a queen? Was it because she had betrayed the king? Was it because she had discovered secrets too dangerous to be known? Or was it something far darker, a curse, a scandal, a truth that could shatter the image of the crown itself? This is where the story turns into legend, with multiple possibilities of her fate. Some said she was imprisoned in a tower far from the capital, kept alive but hidden, her identity stripped away. Others whispered she had escaped across the sea and lived out her life under another name, waiting for history to forget her. And still, others swore she was killed and buried beneath the very palace where she once ruled. Her grave unmarked, her story buried with her bones. What makes this story chilling is not just her disappearance, but the deliberate attempt to erase her entirely. Because when history tries to silence someone, it means they mattered more than we are allowed to know. It means their truth was dangerous. Her mystery continues to echo across time, leaving us with one haunting question. How can someone so powerful, so central to the crown, simply vanish overnight? And what secret did she carry that was worth erasing her from history? This was only the beginning of her story. In the next part, we will peel back the layers of palace intrigue, betrayal, and hidden truths that may reveal why the mysterious queen vanished from history overnight. To truly understand how a queen could disappear so completely, we must step back into the dangerous and glittering world of her royal court. Palaces, to the outside world, were places of splendor, shining halls, feasts that seemed endless, music filling the air, and nobles parading in their finest silks and jewels. But beneath that dazzling surface, the palace was more like a prison wrapped in gold, a place where every smile hid a dagger and every friendship carried a condition. The queen quickly learned that she could trust very few. Servants carried whispers faster than wind, courtiers measured their loyalties by profit, and ambassadors arrived with smiles but departed with secrets. She had entered a marriage not of her choosing, tied to a king whose moods were unpredictable, whose enemies were many, and whose allies could not always be trusted. Yet, she played her role with grace. To the people, she was the shining jewel of the court, but inside the palace, she became a figure of suspicion. It began with her influence. In the council chamber, her voice was soft, but it carried weight. She advised the king on matters of diplomacy, reminding him of promises and dangers, urging him toward peace where others called for war. She softened his temper, convinced him to show mercy, or, on other days, persuaded him to act with cold resolve. Those who once underestimated her began to fear her. Powerful men at court whispered, "The king no longer speaks without her voice in his ear. Who truly rules, the king or the queen?" And in a time when women were expected to smile, stand silently, and birth heirs, a queen with opinions was not celebrated. She was dangerous. Letters written by ambassadors of neighboring kingdoms began to hint at her importance. Reports were sent back, describing her as intelligent, clever, even manipulative. Some praised her as a gift to the kingdom, a queen with vision. Others warned that she was steering the crown down dangerous paths that benefited her family more than her husband's kingdom. That was the first strike against her. She was no longer seen as a bride who brought alliances, but as a strategist. With her own designs, the second strike came in whispers of betrayal. One rumor suggested she was too close to a powerful noble, a man who visited her more often than seemed proper. Another claimed she exchanged letters with a foreign court, passing on secrets in exchange for promises of power. These stories, whether true or false, began to take shape in the minds of those who already despised her influence. And in courts filled with jealous nobles, a rumor could be more lethal than a sword. Yet it was not only her enemies who feared her. The king himself began to feel the shadow of doubt. He adored her beauty, her intelligence, her ability to charm crowds, but kings, above all else, feared betrayal. To be a monarch was to constantly question loyalty, to look into the eyes of friends and wonder if they were plotting treason. And when even the king's wife drew suspicion, paranoia took root. One night, as the story goes, the king was handed a sealed letter by one of his most trusted advisors. The letter contained accusations against the queen, written in careful words, painting her as a traitor. It claimed she had met secretly with emissaries of an enemy kingdom, that she had knowledge of plots against the king, and that she was not merely aware of them, but involved. We may never know if the accusations were true, but in a court where survival depended on eliminating threats quickly, truth mattered less than perception, and perception was beginning to turn against her. From this moment, her fate hung in a fragile balance. Historians who later tried to piece together her life discovered odd details. Records of her daily movements suddenly stopped. Mentions of her presence in the king's court vanished from royal accounts. Events where she should have been seated beside her husband had no mention of her at all. Some historians suggest this was the start of a deliberate erasure, as if someone began cutting her out of history before she was even gone. But the question remains, what actually happened to her? One theory suggests she was placed under house arrest within the palace itself. Stripped of her titles and power, she may have been confined to private chambers, guarded day and night. If this was true, it would explain why no grave was found, why no exile was recorded, and yet why she seemed to vanish. She might have lived the rest of her days behind locked doors, a ghost in the very palace she once ruled. Another possibility is far darker. Poison was a weapon of choice in royal courts, often used to eliminate rivals without open scandal. It left little evidence and could be passed off as illness. Some say she was given a poisoned drink at a feast, or a deadly powder mixed into her medicine. In such a case, her death could be hidden, her body quietly buried, and her name erased. And yet, the most intriguing theory is that she escaped. According to a tale passed down among the common people, the queen disguised herself and fled the palace in the dead of night. Some claimed she took a small band of loyal servants, others that she vanished entirely alone. Stories tell of her boarding a ship at a distant port, sailing across the sea, and living out her life under a false name. If true, then perhaps somewhere in Europe, hidden among ordinary people, a former queen once walked unnoticed. Of course, such theories are difficult to prove. They live in the realm of legend, because history itself was scrubbed clean. What is most chilling is not just her disappearance, but the scale of the erasure. Royal chronicles were rewritten. Portraits of the queen were destroyed or altered. Seals bearing her name were melted down. To erase someone so completely required the will of the crown itself, which means one terrifying possibility remains, that her disappearance was no accident, but an order from the very king who once held her hand at the altar. Why would a king destroy every trace of his queen? Perhaps she knew too much. Perhaps she uncovered a plot that implicated not just nobles, but the king himself. Or perhaps her betrayal, real or imagined, was too great to forgive. Whatever the reason, she became a danger not just to him, but to the stability of the entire monarchy. And in such times, the only solution was silence. The people noticed, of course. For months, they whispered about her fate. Some believed she had been murdered. Others prayed she lived somewhere in secret. But as years passed, her story grew faint, replaced by new scandals, new wars, new rulers. History, as it often does, moved on, and she became a forgotten shadow. But the silence is suspicious. Historians argue that when history hides something so carefully, it is a clue in itself. The act of erasing proves she mattered. Because if she had been unimportant, if she had died of simple illness or lived a quiet exile, there would have been no need to strike her name from the record. Only someone whose truth was dangerous is erased so completely. And so, her legacy becomes not one of certainty, but of mystery. A queen whose life was powerful enough to shape the fate of kings, and whose disappearance was terrifying enough to erase her from history. In this part of her story, we see the queen as both victim and player. She rose to influence, became the voice behind the throne, and earned both admiration and hatred. She played a game in which survival required constant vigilance, but in the end, the game consumed her, whether by betrayal, imprisonment, or escape. Her presence was too dangerous to remain. What secret was she hiding? What truth did she uncover that justified erasing her entirely? These questions still echo centuries later, and perhaps we may never have the answers. But in the shadows of lost history, sometimes the silence tells us more than the words that remain. And yet, this is only part of the story. Because while the queen herself vanished, fragments of her life continued to resurface, letters attributed to her hand, strange records in foreign lands, and stories told in whispers by servants who dared not reveal their names. These fragments suggest she may not have been as lost as history wanted us to believe. In the next part, we will explore these surviving fragments, traces of her existence that refused to be silenced, and the chilling possibility that her ghost still haunted the court long after she disappeared. Though her presence was carefully erased from the chronicles, history is never as obedient as kings desire. Even when officials tried to silence her memory, fragments of her life slipped through the cracks, tiny pieces of evidence that historians, centuries later, would stumble upon like shards of broken glass. They could not form the full picture, but they reflected the truth that someone had tried very hard to hide. The first of these fragments came in the form of letters, not letters preserved in the royal archives, which had been scoured clean of her name, but letters found in distant lands, tucked away in foreign collections. Ambassadors who once visited her court sometimes kept private notes, writing back to their masters not only about treaties and taxes, but also about the behavior of the queen. In one such letter, written by a Venetian envoy, there is a single puzzling line: "The queen is absent, and yet her shadow troubles the king." What? Did this mean, was she already missing by the time of his visit? Or was her absence something deliberate, orchestrated to mislead? That one sentence opens 1,000 doors of possibility. Another letter, found in the archives of Spain, mentions her directly. There are whispers of great disturbance in the king's household. for his consort is accused of treachery. She has not been seen these many months, though none dare speak it aloud. This letter, written in hurried script, almost seems as though the writer feared even committing the words to paper. Yet it survives, a ghostly reminder that her disappearance was not only real, but shocking enough to ripple across Europe. The letters alone might be dismissed as rumor. But then came another clue. Records from a merchant ship in the Mediterranean. The captain of this ship noted the passage of a mysterious noblewoman, traveling under an assumed name, accompanied by a small retinue. The description of the woman, her hair color, her clothing, her unusual accent, bears a striking resemblance to the vanished queen. Could this be proof that she escaped across the sea, or was it simply coincidence? Historians debate this endlessly, but the very possibility fuels the mystery. If she truly did escape, then she lived a life unrecorded, a queen stripped of her crown but free from her prison. Did she live quietly in exile, her royal identity hidden behind a false name? Did she write letters back to her homeland, begging her family for protection? Or did she die, unknown, her body buried in foreign soil with no monument to mark her passing? But there is another piece of evidence, perhaps the most chilling of all. In a monastery's library, a manuscript was discovered centuries later. It was a chronicle of local events, written by monks who often recorded gossip alongside history. In its pages, one passage stands out. A lady of great importance, brought low by the wrath of her own, was delivered here under the veil of secrecy. She is kept not as guest, but as prisoner, her name forbidden upon our lips. The description matches the time frame of her disappearance. Some historians believe this proves she was not killed, but hidden away in a religious house, imprisoned until death, condemned not by law but by secrecy. It was not uncommon for disgraced royals to be placed in convents or monasteries, silenced, forever behind stone walls. If this was her fate, then she lived out her final years in cloistered silence, stripped of her jewels, her gowns, her voice, until history itself forgot her. And yet, other fragments contradict this. A poem, written anonymously in France, tells of a lost queen who wanders in disguise, her crown stolen but her spirit unbroken. The poem is vague, but many believe it was inspired by her story, passed by travelers and carried like wildfire through taverns and markets. We are left with two opposing images. One of a woman buried alive within stone walls, erased and forgotten. The other of a woman who escaped and wandered free, hidden among ordinary people but alive. Both cannot be true, yet both feel possible. What complicates the matter even more is the silence of the king. After her disappearance, he never remarried. Immediately, though he could have secured another alliance quickly. For years, he avoided the subject of his vanished wife. This silence has been interpreted in two ways. Some suggest it was guilt that he had ordered her removal and could not bear to replace her so soon. Others believe it was fear that she still lived, and as long as she lived, her claim as queen remained a threat to any new union. And then there are the darker whispers, the ones rarely written but often spoken in hushed tones. These suggest that the queen uncovered something dangerous, a truth that could have shattered the monarchy itself. Perhaps she discovered a plot involving the king's own advisors, or even evidence of betrayal within the royal family. If she knew such a secret, then her disappearance was not just about jealousy or suspicion. It was about survival, hers and the crown's. Some say she left behind letters, hidden somewhere, that contained this truth. Letters that, if ever found, could rewrite history. The fact that her story was buried so thoroughly makes this theory all the more compelling. For who goes to such lengths to erase a person, unless what they carried was too dangerous to ever surface? The people of her kingdom, though deprived of facts, did not forget her entirely. Ballads were sung about her, though over time they changed, blending her with legends and myths. In some songs, she became a tragic heroine, betrayed by her husband. In others, she was a ghostly figure who roamed the palace halls at night, searching for justice. Children grew up hearing stories of the queen who vanished, her name lost but her mystery surviving. Even centuries later, travelers reported hearing strange tales in the countryside. In one village, they spoke of a noblewoman who once lived among them, wearing a veil to hide her face, but whose manner of speech betrayed her high birth. In another, they claimed a grave marked only with the symbol of a crown held the body of a queen who had run from her kingdom. These accounts cannot be proven, but they add to the haunting aura of her story. What makes her disappearance so powerful is not simply that she vanished, but that her life became a puzzle made of contradictions. Each fragment of evidence points in a different direction, and every historian who examines her story comes away with a different conclusion. Some declare her dead at the hands of assassins. Others insist she lived in disguise. Some argue she was imprisoned for life. And yet, all agree on one thing: her erasure was deliberate. Someone wanted her gone so badly that they tried to burn her from memory itself. And yet, they failed. For here we are, centuries later, still speaking her name, still piecing together the scattered clues. Perhaps that is her true victory, that in trying to silence her, her enemies only made her story louder. What we can say with certainty is that her disappearance reshaped the kingdom. Without her presence, the king's rule shifted. Alliances crumbled, wars broke out, and the crown itself weakened. It is almost as though her absence cursed the very throne she once graced. Some even believed her ghost haunted the king, tormenting him for his betrayal, ensuring his reign would never know peace. As we move deeper into her story, the final part will examine the legacy she left behind, the ways her disappearance shaped future queens, the lessons drawn from her silence, and the enduring mystery that refuses to die. Because history may have erased her name, but it could not erase her shadow. And sometimes, the shadows tell us more than the words on the page. The story of the vanished queen does not end with her disappearance. In fact, it is her absence that gave her story life. A queen who dies is remembered in marble and stone, her tomb guarded, her name carved in history. But a queen who vanishes, who slips through the cracks of time, becomes something greater than history. She becomes legend. For centuries after she vanished, whispers of her survival spread like wildfire. Some swore they had seen her in distant lands, cloaked in rags but carrying herself with the dignity of royalty. Others believed she had been murdered and that her ghost haunted the very palace that had once been hers, appearing in mirrors, drifting through dark corridors. Her presence marked by the sudden extinguishing of candles. The king himself could not escape her shadow. Those who lived during his reign wrote that he grew restless after her disappearance, plagued by strange visions and sleepless nights. Some claimed he confessed on his deathbed that she had been taken from him by treachery, but that he could never speak the full truth aloud. Others insisted he was her very executioner, that he had ordered her silence to protect himself from scandal. No record survives to prove either, and perhaps that is why the story endures. For where certainty ends, mystery begins. The absence of her name from official records only fuels the fire. Every blank page is a question. Every missing document is a spark for speculation. Who had the power to erase a queen? Why did no one dare to preserve her memory? These questions echo across centuries unanswered, demanding attention. But if her name was erased from the chronicles, it survived in the mouths of the people. Folk songs passed from village to village, sung by shepherds and sailors, each adding their own embellishment. In one version she was betrayed by her husband, in another she was poisoned by jealous rivals, and in yet another she escaped and lived among peasants, her true identity hidden even from those closest to her. Over time, these songs blurred the line between history and myth, until she became a figure both real and unreal, a woman who may have lived, may have died, but could never truly disappear. Historians, searching for truth, find themselves trapped in a maze of contradictions. On one hand, there is evidence that she may have been confined to a convent, stripped of power but kept alive in secrecy. On the other, there are reports of a noblewoman resembling her seen far from the kingdom. And then, there are the darker theories that she was quietly killed, her body disposed of, her memory erased because she knew something that could shatter the monarchy itself. The truth may never be known, but what cannot be denied is the impact of her disappearance. Without her presence, the royal court descended into chaos. Alliances formed through her marriage began to crumble. Foreign powers questioned the stability of the crown, and the king himself was seen as weakened. A single missing queen had the power to destabilize an entire kingdom. Some say this was her revenge that, in erasing her, the king unknowingly cursed himself. Wars broke out soon after, and rebellions rose from within. Whether coincidence or consequence, many believe the vanished queen's spirit lingered, guiding fate from beyond the grave. Punishing those who wronged her, her story also left an indelible mark on how future queens were treated. No longer could a royal wife simply disappear without explanation. Courts across Europe tightened their rules. Chroniclers recorded every detail of queens' lives, and laws were written to prevent such erasure from happening again. In this way, her silence forced history to become louder for those who came after her. But perhaps the most powerful legacy she left was the enduring fascination with her mystery. Even today, her story is studied, debated, retold. Some novels portray her as a tragic heroine, others as a scheming traitor, and still others as an innocent victim caught in the ruthless machinery of power. Every generation reimagines her, because every generation sees something of itself in her struggle. Think of what her story represents: a woman silenced, yet never forgotten, a queen erased, yet immortalized through whispers. She embodies the fear that power can destroy identity, but also the hope that memory can outlive power. That is why her story resonates even now. For in every age, people understand what it means to be silenced, and they take comfort in the idea that truth, though buried, always finds a way to rise again. The physical traces of her life may be few, but they are haunting. A single letter hinting at scandal, a monk's record of a mysterious prisoner, a grave marked only by a crown, its occupant unknown. Each fragment is like a breadcrumb, leading us deeper into the forest of speculation, but never quite revealing the full path. Historians follow these clues with feverish devotion, yet the trail always vanishes into shadow. And yet, maybe that is fitting. Maybe her story was never meant to have an ending. Maybe the true power of her life lies in its incompleteness. For what is more captivating than a question that cannot be answered? What is more enduring than a mystery that refuses to die? As we imagine her final days, the mind conjures many scenes. Perhaps she was locked away in a cold convent cell, staring at the same stone walls until her last breath, her only crime being that she loved too much or knew too much. Perhaps she walked among strangers in a distant land, her royal identity hidden but burning inside her, always fearing discovery. Perhaps she met a violent end, silenced in the dark by those who feared her voice. Each possibility is tragic. Each one is haunting, and each one makes her story unforgettable. The vanished queen may not have monuments or portraits, but she has something greater. She has us, we, who tell her story. We, who keep her memory alive. For as long as we speak of her, she is not truly gone. The king who tried to erase her name failed, because centuries later, we are still here, wondering, searching, imagining, and so. Her legacy is not in what she achieved while alive, but in what she became after she disappeared. A riddle that defies time, a shadow that refuses to fade. A queen who, though silenced, has spoken louder through history than many who reigned. Openly, her story ends not with death, but with mystery. And perhaps that is the most powerful ending of all. Because in the end, the vanished queen teaches us that silence can be more powerful than words, that absence can be louder than presence, and that some mysteries are meant to live forever.